Okay, so if you haven't watched part 1, please go back and watch part 1 of this series. It's very important so you can follow along. In part 2, we're going to pick up where we left off, and we're talking about attaching these two housings. And you can see that they come together very nicely. And then, of course, we're going to screw with 4 screws the housing together. These 4 screws, because this is a glass-filled molded housing, it's a resin, we do not need the Tef gel. We have stainless steel screw, will go in, it's tapped and everything's all good. It is a Phillips head, so you will need a Phillips head screwdriver. Okay? Now, you will also need the O-ring. The O-ring obviously fits on the head side, and the O-ring just simply goes around that area right there. So again, you can see it just installs right there and stays right there. That O-ring is what gets squished, and if you look at this, study this pretty hard, you will never see it on camera, so I won't show you, but you can actually see the O-ring groove where the O-ring will sit and everything. So again, like with all O-rings, you're going to go ahead and you're going to install the O-ring, and then once the O-ring is installed, you can go ahead and slam this all together and then screw this all down together as you need. Keeping in mind that O-ring is static. Okay, it's not dynamic. It doesn't work. It's not like the O-ring when you have to open and close those silly battery housings the whole time, and you know that's a lot of customer interference, should I say, and therefore creates a lot of flooding potential. This is done by you once. Once it's sealed, the customer just uses the EO cord. So again, that you are going to need some lubrication, and this is only because we're Scuba, we use pretty much exclusively throughout here. You could use silicone, but we don't. We pretty much exclusively use the nitrox, and I know you guys are thinking crystal lube on you. I know it's not nitrox in there, but the point is there's no confusion in this place between silicone. Everything is crystal lube, so that's why we do the crystal lube. But like all O-rings, you're going to take a time and you're going to rub that crystal lube into the actual pores of the O-ring. Don't just smear it on your fingers or smear it around the walls of this. Get that O-ring and really work in that crystal lube, right? And then when you install this, make sure there's no hairs or fibers. If you need to, if it's a customer's, you can use a toothbrush and clean the grooves if you need to get out the dirt and sand and everything else that may have collected. If it hasn't, great. But if it has, then get those nice and clean, because that is your sealing surface. And at that point, you can go ahead, replace that O-ring, and then the whole thing just gets slammed back together. All right, and of course 4 screws. And if you don't know how to do 4 screws, I'll tell you. This one, that one, this one, that one. You cross the screws. Don't tighten them all the way. You know, tight, 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 tight. 3, 4 times, and you should have it down. Okay, so when you finally get it down, the way it's going to look is you'll notice it's going to look different. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. Then like this, yeah, you'll see there's no little extra groove or lip. Yeah, you'll see the little extra groove or lip. That's how it tightens down. It clamshells that O-ring and sandwiches that O-ring into its spot. Okay. Okay. Let's go ahead and look at some other pieces here on the workbench you're going to need. So we talked about that housing. We talked a little bit about the crystal lube. You're going to need some anti-lock. Or thread locker. What's nice about the thread locker is anything you thread together, you're going to lock that in place so it's not going to unscrew itself. So you need a little thread locker as well. Of course, you're going to need a crimper. You're going to need some wire strippers, okay, with different sizes for the wire. We've got our 4 screws right over here. There's 3, there's a 4th one. We've got our switch, we've already talked about it, a single pole switch. We've got our switch boot. We've got our little bushing that will actually go like this, and you can see, because I've been a service tech for so long, what I end up doing is I end up layering everything in sort of my sub builds. Like this is a sub build, that's a sub build, that's a sub build, you know, stuff like that. This is my through port. What you'll notice with the through port is on the through port we have several pieces to the through port. We have the actual strain relief and cap. That's this thing right over here, strain relief and cap. Okay. We actually have the housing mount and then the sealing bushing inside that mount. We also have a very small O-ring. You can see my hand right there. And what that O-ring does is obviously goes over this part. So not the bushing part, but the part that screws down into the metal or plastic. Okay? And then we have a nut for the back side. All right? So again, that O-ring is going to need a little lubrication. And then once you've got it lubed up and the lube rubbed in, you're going to go ahead and you're going to install that O-ring. And again, notice how that O-ring is installed on the side that will go down in the housing, not the side that's curved and it's got the little, you know, this side, the idea is this compresses around the wire. So you can see how that compresses. This side doesn't compress. The non-compression side, okay, goes into the housing itself. And again, I just work that O-ring down and this. Now we use these long 12 mil through ports, long base that is, 12 mil through ports, because the plastic housing is fairly thick in this area right here. When I say the plastic, the resin housing is fairly thick. So again, when you're doing that bushing through like that, the O-ring will actually create that seal in that area right there. That's the O-ring seal. Notice how we have the switch guard and then we have the wire. So that this piece here is the switch guard. So you don't accidentally turn this thing on and off. And then of course that's your O-ring. And then from the other side, your nut. Now I'm not gonna do all the little things, but you want to put a little thread locker. So just a spot of red thread locker on this side, and then you go ahead and you thread lock this down, okay? And you basically screw this down. And then again, you know, I'm gonna make a little joke here because this is plastic. It's a really good idea to get in there and do it really, really tight, huh? Now, again, keep in mind that the O-ring does the seal, not the strength of the system. So again, you know, you get in there and you get it tight, but you don't have to break it, right? You can simply use a little 15 mil spanner there, or wrench, I think is what the American name is. I'll just use the word spanner because I'm South African, and there you go. So that actually locks it down really nice, and you can see that when I screwed that down, the O-ring actually compresses and should compress. And the most important thing is if you've got thread locker on there, that's not going to go anywhere. Notice that inside here is the little bushing that goes on the wire. You don't have to take this out. It should already be in there, but you can always check for it. There's the bushing. That little bushing is what's going to seal around your wire. So if you're pulling out an old wire, for example, what you want to do is you're going to have to replace this through port. They're cheap because this bushing may be damaged. So it's important that, you know, again, I always start with a fresh through port, right? And again, this is, you know, the least expensive, especially when servicing somebody's system or you're changing over the wires. The last thing you want to do is try to peel this off some wire to reuse it. It's better just to replace this entire system and or just this bushing part. But either way. So once I've done that, what you can see is, again, I'm going to want to go ahead and I'm going to want to put on my, you know what, and I'm not even going to use that crimp, so I'm just going to go back to where I was. So there I am with my wire right there, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my strain relief on right now. So I've got the strain relief on, and then what happens is this whole system then goes through that bushing. There's that strain relief, and now of course that's going to screw down. Now keeping in mind that again there I want to put some thread lock, okay? So I want to stop that system from unthreading itself. So again, I do not need to go absolutely crazy with it, you know, because it's compressing around the wire and that's what's creating the seal, not the strength of it. But I want to be able to thread it to whatever distance I want. Now, of course, I have to adjust on my wire where and how much wire I want in there. Okay, and so I'm going to leave a fair amount that I can both reach the battery and, of course, the switch, you know, so whatever that is. And, you know, and again, if you set up 1,000 of these, you can figure out that that's 6 inches of line, right? But I don't want you to be that precise, but that's basically what you see there, right? 4 to 6 inches, a 4-inch tail sticking out of 6 inches of total wire. And again, I don't go too crazy on this, and eventually, you know, you're going to go ahead and you're going to just seal that up and get it snug down where it's nice and snug. And then again, there you go. So it's definitely snug. Okay. At this point, you're going to go ahead now and you're going to strip this so that you end up exposing the wires. Let's go ahead and work on the switch, and then I can show you the wires inside. So again, with the switch, to rebuild the switch, I'm going to take the switch and I'm going to have the nut all the way down, and I'm going to put the bushing on. And again, if somebody has flooded their switch, chuck the whole system, right? It's done. You're not going to try to save the switch or the boot or the bush. Well, the bushing might, but you can throw it away. It's just they're really inexpensive parts. And so then you're going to go ahead and you're going to put that in so that the poles, see the on-off, That's on, because the two poles are opposite the switch. Off, because you can just picture in your mind that's doing that. So that's going to go into the housing that way. So when I throw the switch on towards the wire, it's on. Back, it's off. So again, on the resin housing, you have to get rid of both nuts. You can't have both nuts in place. On the aluminum housing, you can have one nut down there. All right. So again, I get rid of both nuts. So on the resin housing, I end up like that. And then again, I can thread this on, goes all the way down. And now when I push the switch up, and again the pole should be closest towards that, what you'll notice is there's give or take 3 to 4 threads sticking out. So 3 to 4 threads on the switch. It's hard to show with this camera and light, but 3 to 4 threads should be sticking out. Not one thread and not 10 threads. All right, 3 to 4 threads is all you want sticking out. Again, with the switch boot, just a drop of the anti-lock, right, of the thread lock, the red thread lock. So the idea there is so that basically locks into place. Now you can put a dab of silicone or the crystal lube on the inside of the boot, the very inside of the boot, so that it smoothly, when you're screwing it on, smoothly runs across that metal switch. So it just gives you a little bit of, you know, a little less resistance as you're doing that. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to thread that on, and you'll feel it tighten way up. And you notice that I use the housing to my advantage. So I jam my fingers in there, something like that to my advantage. And now I go ahead and I tighten that up. So, you know, I'll get my fingers in there, get that nice and tight. And then the interesting part is you can use a regular old spark plug jacket, you know, socket. And that fits perfectly around that, and that gives you that little extra tight that you need, that it's going to keep. And now you can see that the switch is installed and definitely in the correct manner. So from this side, the poles are closest to the wall of the housing. Okay, that's a really good picture right there of it. And of course, from this side, you can see how now it's on. Okay, so at this point, once we're there, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to get the wires and prepare the wires on the battery and on the housing so that we can actually then install all of that. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we're back now, and what you see is how we've taken the battery wires. So the battery comes like this, and we've installed on the black, we've installed one of our female spades on the black. That's because we're going to switch black on the switch. So we have to have a female spade. Okay, so the switch has got the male spade, so we need to install a female spade on the battery black. Okay, on the battery red, we're going to install a male spade, just like that. So that's a male spade, all right, on the positive wire of the battery. So the red wire of the battery, male spade. That way you can't mess this up. Okay, so we have female spade on the black, male spade on the red. Then what we do is on the EO cord, on the black cord of the EO, we're going to put another female spade. So that way, black female spade goes to switch, black female spade goes to switch. Very, very easy. And then on the positive white pole of the EO cord, we're going to put the female spade on that. So you have male spade on the red, female spade on the white, and then two female spades on the black, like that. And that's basically exactly how you set it up. Female spade, battery side of the red, female spade. 3 female spades. And then the male spades are EO cord white, male spade, and then 2 male spades on the switch. Okay? And so once you get all those crimped in, and you should know how to do wire crimping, you shred the sheath, you crimp on using the crimp-on tool and so forth, and away you go. It ends up looking like that. I also want you to notice that even so the outside may not have a serial number, we always repeat the serial number on the inside as well. So you can always send us the customer's serial number as well. So we have a good idea of when they purchased this, when it was manufactured, who manufactured, what the defects might be. You'll notice that we jam the battery in there using a little piece of webbing that allows us to both pull the battery out using the webbing and push the battery in with the webbing. So again, when you're shoving the battery into the housing, there's a little piece of webbing and the battery is just the correct size so that this gets jammed in, as you can see, but to get it out you have to remove the webbing and the whole thing will come right out. So that was the idea of not, of having the housing slightly bigger than the batteries, but of course a way to get these batteries out when you want to get the battery out of the canister. As you can see, the battery just pops out. So again, that's what that webbing is for. And then that pretty much wraps up the pieces that you can do. Now these batteries right here, okay, these are the 10.4 amp hour, 11.1 volt average, so it starts 12.6, comes down to 8, 11.1 average volt lithium ion packs. All right, if you're going to use the smaller pack, such as the 4.4 pack, you're going to have to fill this in with more of that webbing, so that the battery doesn't flop around. You want the battery to be very solid and snug and secure in there. Once you've done all of that, you can go ahead and you'll notice that we can slightly bend those poles down as well. So the poles on the switch get slightly bent down so that you don't end up with any issues, and then the whole thing gets jammed back together and then sealed right back up. Again, O-ring and everything else we've gone through. So that pretty much concludes the repair of the UTD batteries and stuff like that. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at sales@utdequipment.com. And as always, guys, safe diving.